Hi, I'm Shira Carpel.
And I'm Shayna Gaunt, and we're board-certified behavior analysts. At How to ABA, we provide practical resources, community, and support to ABA professionals. In each episode of our podcast, we will be having real conversations with real people, sharing real stories about ABA.
We'll share relevant strategies and actionable tips that will make us all better ABA practitioners. It's the ABA content you need that you're not going to learn in a textbook.
Hi, Farrah. Welcome.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Today we've got Farrah Benson on our call. And where are you calling in from?
Clinton, South Carolina.
Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So Farrah, we're so happy to have you. One of the things that's near and dear to my heart is always ABA and its application to the classroom, because I did come into the field through education and special ed before I was a BCBA. So I'm super excited about this conversation. So if you could start by telling us a little bit about your role and what you do.
I'm actually a preschool special ed teacher. I work with primarily 3-year-olds this year, and I have a caseload of 17 students, and of those 17, 14 of them are on the spectrum. But I'm also a board certified behavior analyst, so I'm able to provide ABA strategies and services within my classroom. And my assistants provide a lot of the line therapy for me, and we work very closely together to implement strategies and stuff with our kids.
Wow. Can you give us an idea about how you embed ABA into the classroom? It's easier said than done. And I think you'd agree with me on that.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's the biggest challenge when you're a teacher and you start wanting to implement ABA. When I first came into it, it was very kind of a clinical style with a discrete trial training. You sit at the table and you go through the cards, and it was very, very structured, which is great. But I also found with 3-year-olds, that's very difficult to do that for an extended period of time in the classroom. We have 2.5 hours. So I had to look for other ways and creative ways to embed it in what I was doing. Even with writing my IEPs and my lesson plans, for me to write an ABA strategy in my lesson plan, my principals and stuff, they're like, I don't know what this is. So I had to find a way to implement that. So, there's a lot of things that we do with, in ABA, basic skills like imitation, even verbal imitation, your echoics and things like that. I use my circle time as a way to practice and implement those skills with the imitation with our songs. We start off with just motor imitation. Even after we do head, shoulder, knees, and toes, and we're done practicing touching those body parts, I'll go back and everybody touch your eyes, and we make a game of it. And my assistants, for the students who aren't doing that independently, they're kind of hand over hand and showing them how to do it. They're modeling it for them. And so we have time to practice that. So I use my circle time as a way to practice the imitation. When it comes to, once I have students trying to vocalize those songs and sing along, then we practice doing that as well. So that would be one way that I implement in the classroom. And obviously I have somebody that's kind of keeping up with data on some of those things so we can keep track of it. But it's kind of a team effort. We're all using it. We're all doing it together with the students, and we're all helping them do that. And even when we're doing, for instance, you're matching identical and non-identical things, starting with objects. A lot of the activities we do at the table is using your puzzles and matching your puzzle pieces, animals to animals with the big knobby puzzles. And we're teaching fine motor, imitating, picking it up and putting it on the puzzle. And now we're working on matching those pieces. So there's so many little things that we do in the classroom already that the more I started studying ABA and looking at each student, I realized there's a lot of things that we already do in the classroom that uses ABA. We're just not aware of it.
That's exactly it. I love how it's not so often we feel like as BCBA as well, it's ABA or it's education.
Right.
And I think if you, the more experience you get and the more exposure you get, the more you see that ABA is education. And it's not about teaching it, discrete trials and getting the kids to, in this vacuum setting, be able to respond, but it's all about embedding that natural learning into education, which I just love.
Yeah, and I think we also, because as our goal is to teach generalization, that's our end goal, especially for us to be back away and for them to be independent. So for me in the classroom, it's naturally what we're doing. So it's so much easier to teach that generalization when we're doing what we're already doing. And then we talk about task analysis. Well, I'm looking at a student saying, okay, they're not doing this. Well, what's that beginning piece? Well, they just need to imitate picking up the puzzle piece for right now before we even get to matching. So we're already breaking down those skills to the finest piece we can before we build. And I didn't realize how much I did that until I started really looking into it. And as a teacher, I think that way anyway. I look at each one of my students. What do they need? Where are they? I meet them where they're at, and then we build from there. Well, that's the same thing as using task analysis. You start where they're at, and then you build from there on those next skills. So it was really, the more I studied and the more just getting in the classroom and practicing it, even providing ABA services for other classrooms in our district. I did that for a short period of time. It helped me see that we're really doing this already. So when teachers are like, oh, okay, what cards do I need to use? I'm like, well, you're already doing that during your circle time, or you're already doing that during your reading lesson when you break out your vocabulary cards. Like, you don't need to create anything new. Let's use what you have in the classroom. So that's one thing I did try to teach other teachers, is how to use what they had in the classroom. They don't need to make something new. So it's really
You said a couple of really great comments in there, and I'm laughing as you're talking, and it's because Sheer and I are both nodding at everything you're saying. And then, like, wait a second, this is a podcast. They can't see us nodding.
And I'm doing the same thing as you're talking. I'm like, yeah, that's right.
yeah. We're nodding. But you said a couple of really great things. And the one is, you're already doing ABA anyways as a teacher. And, oftentimes I'll go into a classroom and some teachers are, have different experiences with BCBAs, right? Sometimes BCBAs will go into a classroom that's non-ABA. And, I'm the BCBA. You have to follow what I do because this is what I say and blah, blah, blah. And teachers like, oh no, here comes the BCBA, which if anyone's like that, they got to stop doing that, because as BCBAs, we really do need to pair ourselves with reinforcement with teachers. But oftentimes I'll say to teachers, listen, like, ABA really is just good teaching. If you're a really awesome teacher, you are doing ABA, you just don't even know it. Right? Mm-hmm. BCBA or not in the classroom, you just don't know you're doing ABA. Mm-hmm. But every single time, you say great job when the student does something, or cheers them on, or gives them a sticker for this, or breaks down a task because they can't quite get that and does that error analysis. That's all ABA, which is amazing.
Yes, we just don't put that terminology with it in the educational standpoint. And so it's really interesting when teachers like, I need ABA. I'm like, well, let's see what you're doing first. Tell me what you're doing. And when I start talking them through it, they're like, oh, well, I'm kind of already doing that. I'm like, yeah, let's just find something different. That wasn't working. So let's just look at a new strategy. Let's look at something else. So
yeah, that's amazing. And I have so many thoughts on this and questions. One of the biggest struggles I find is taking people with a background in education and getting them to take data. And I see you agreeing with me. Yeah. So how did you overcome that? And what have you found to be successful?
Well, it is funny because I will say now education is going more data driven. We're having to do progress monitoring. We're having to do tiered teaching to, here's our level 1 kids, here's our level 2. So education shifting to that. The problem is we're not preparing our students for those coming out of the education programs. So I think that's what's so overwhelming for teachers. They're used to just the grades. And I'm like, really, you're doing data. Don't worry about ongoing. That percentage. That percentage is data, but you got to look at what the other pieces to that. So for me, that's obviously hard when you're involved with 3-year-olds for 2.5 hours and you're on the floor and you're doing all these things. But I walk around with sticky notes. I have sticky notes that have just my goals 1, 2, and 3, because I know what those goals are, and it's like tally notes. And I use my assistants a lot. They keep a lot of they keep anecdotal notes as well, because then they can tell me kind of ABCs of things that have happened. But they're keeping tally notes on stuff, little tally marks. We also, because we use Google Slides a lot for some of our activities, I've been able to do a Google form so they can go back and just kind of click on the things they got correct. Well, that kind of creates my graph and my data.
How great is that?
Awesome. Yeah. So that's been a really good thing and easy for my assistants to use, because they can even have on their phone. So they're just sitting there clicking, but they're still involved with the students. And it's not like got these fancy data sheets and, because that gets a little overwhelming. That's the biggest thing I saw when I actually had a BCBA come in my classroom, and the data that, you're working, you had a sheet, you're keeping up with all this stuff, but you're trying to work with a student, you had all these cards, you had all this stuff. Well, in the classroom, it's just hard to do all of that. So I wanted to try to find a way to make it easier and human friendly, as I say, teacher friendly and assistant friendly.
Yeah.
So we use sticky notes. We have sticky notes around the room so they can just, tally up things. Because at the end of the day, I just need something to know what they're getting. And they even make notes like hand over hand or independently. So I can keep up with how many times they've done something. We use their little activities a lot of times, and they'll put that stuff in the corner. So I can go back and pull out their journal and like, oh, okay, yep. They did this independently 3 out of 5 times,
Wow. Yeah. So we're big fans of it doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be doable. And I really try to, when I work with teachers, I try not to come in and give them, here's all your data sheets and here's what you need to do. But I really try to work with them in terms of what's going to work for your classroom. Is it probe? Is it rating scale? Is it just at the end of the day, like you said, writing a little note on their work, on their permanent product, and really understanding where a teacher's coming from in not having 17 arms and not being able to collect frequency and partial interval and duration. It's just not realistic.
Also understanding what your end goal is too, right? So it's not about, hey, you need to take data for the sake of taking data, or you've got all these sticky notes around your classroom, which I love, by the way. And yes, for these people who are listening, sticky notes can be data, but
they're awesome.
But also knowing why you're taking the data, right? So I don't need to take data on every single little behavior just because I need data. I need to take data on this one particular thing because my end goal is this, and that's why I'm doing it. Or I need frequency data because I need to know over time whether this is increasing or decreasing, period.
Exactly. And I think that's the biggest thing, is getting teachers to understand and feel comfortable with, yes, we want you to take data, but not on everything that's going on in the classroom. We want that, the one behavior we're focused on right now, let's just focus on that one. This is all we're worried about right now. We'll get to the other, if we need to get to other stuff, we'll get to that later. So, and I think it can get very overwhelming with, like you said, the big fancy data sheets and the big binders that they can come with all this stuff. And, I've seen teachers' faces and it's like they shut down immediately. It's like, I can't handle another piece of paper from anybody else.
Yeah, so, no, that's so true. And I'm wondering, one of my other struggles is, taking someone who's in an education background and giving them the training, right? One of the most common things is I see that teachers mean so well, and so many teachers, especially early childhood teachers, really just want to help, right? But helping your child by doing things for them is not going to build their independence. And so I find myself often trying to explain why it's important to stand back. It's important to have a certain way to prompt, or a certain way to not give all the answers to the student, but letting them learn. How do you find has been the most effective way to train the staff who may be coming from a different background than ABA into using these types of methods?
I think the one thing that I've learned, because I've seen that a lot, and as a teacher, sometimes I've been guilty of that too, because we get so caught up in the things we have to accomplish, is to remind them that, well, I'll give an example. I had a student years ago that they're like, he's just not getting it. He can't do it. He's just not getting this. And I'm like, but he, 2, 3, 4 minutes later, he's responding to what we asked him to do. He does it. It's just not, it doesn't look like it's when we want him to. So I kept sitting there, and I was like, all right, give him the prompt or the question or whatever. And I said, stop, just give it to him and don't say anything else. And I timed it. She's like, he's not saying anything, he's not getting it. And I said, hang on, just give it a minute. It took him 17 seconds to respond to that question.
Which can feel like a lifetime.
It does. And she's like, that was 5 minutes. I said, it was 17 seconds. I know it felt like a long time. That's a long time. But it wasn't 5 minutes. I said, he needs 17 seconds to process what we told him. And now this was a kid in the special ed class. And I've used that example when I've talked to teachers. And I said, now that's coming from a student with language delays and communication delays, and he's got to think about it. He's got to process it. Then he's got to figure out how to say it. There's a whole lot going on there. Well, you go into any classroom, when there's so much going on, 20 kids, you're playing, you're learning, all this stuff is going on. They hear background noises. Now you're trying to get them to learn and do stuff. You've got to give them that processing time. You've got to give them the opportunity to process it, to interact with it. You have to give them that time. And I said, this kid took 17 seconds, and I've even timed it. It's like, we're going to sit here for 17 seconds. Let's see what it feels like. And you would have thought it had been 20 minutes. It's so uncomfortable. I mean, and you're just like, just say it. Just give me the answer, Like, no, that was only 17 seconds. So I think we, as adults, lose track of what that time feels like and what that time is. And we forget and we try to rush learning.
For sure. Because
of the standards and because of the pressure that gets put on us. So it's like, we have to do this now, and it has to be done now, and you have to get it now. And we forget that these are still, whether any age, whether there's preschool, middle school, or high school, regardless of where they're at, whether they have a disability or they're carrying baggage in from their home life, whatever, they need processing time. They need that time to figure out what they're learning, what we're trying to teach them. Mm-hmm. And so that was one thing that I did was very enlightening to teachers, was to let them feel what 17 seconds feels like.
That's so true. And I think that so many of us coming into education with an ABA background, it's so hard for us to let our students make a mistake, right? Like, we want to jump in there and we want that errorless teaching and we want to over prompt, and it's all from a place of very well meaning. But when they go into a classroom, guess what? They're going to have to function without somebody like breathing down their neck saying like, say this answer, don't do that, do this. And I think as BCBAs and ABA professionals, we need to remember to give our kids those opportunities to make mistakes. It's okay. It's okay to give them time. It's okay to not be errorless all the time, because they're going to learn so much more from figuring it out than from relying on somebody whispering in their ear.
Right. And I think with that, I mean, we always, as a parent, I'm always telling my kids, failure is not failure. Failure is learning. Anytime you make a mistake or you're not doing it well, you're learning from that. So take that and learn. And I think that's something we need to transfer to students as well. It's going to teach them to persevere. It's going to teach them when they get frustrated because it's not going the way they want to, then we can help them with that as well. So they're learning a lot of life skills, not just how to do this specific skill, but it's life skills, it's functional skills. There's so many things that our kids can learn when we give them that time to process or to make a mistake and move on,
That's great. I'm really not over prompting and trying to get your agenda out there, but letting the kids learn. Yeah, I love that. So if you had some advice for somebody coming into your type of role, or thinking about a newly minted BCBA, or someone who's just getting into the field, like what would be your advice to somebody?
I think don't be afraid to ask questions. We don't know all the answers. For me, I'm the only BCBA in my district. So I've had to create a community for myself and reach out to people on Facebook and find groups that I'm comfortable with, that I can interact with, that I can ask questions, that I can learn from. So if you're in a situation like that where you're isolated on, a lonely little island, you have to reach out, and it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to find people that you can work with. It's even okay to find somebody that can kind of mentor you, because I think it's intimidating. I saw this a lot, and I read this on Facebook a lot when I first got board certified in my groups. We felt like we were imposters, like you work
the imposter
time
syndrome
to pass the exam, and then all of a sudden you're going, "Am I really can I really do this? Like, am I really am I really prepared?" You kind of feel like this fake when you go in. So it's okay to have those feelings. It's okay to reach out to people, find someone to mentor you a little bit when you're getting started. And I think that's one thing I've done. I've done a lot of my own research. I don't mind reading articles. I join groups like How to ABA and those kinds of professional groups where I can get information. I can learn. I'm constantly learning. Like, I'm all about anything new, to learn more, to make me better at what I'm doing. The more I've done that, though, I think the more comfortable I am with what I'm doing. And I'm okay being the only BCBA here. I don't feel alone because I have people I've reached out to that I have my own little community. So,
that's really important.
I think finding your village and your people when you're first starting off is extremely important.
It's so true. I mean, when I first started out, I was a lonely ABA therapist in some kid's basement, right?
Yeah.
And there's nobody there, sure, there was another therapist on the team, but that therapist came in when I left, or, I would go for lunch and that therapist would come after lunch. So there was really no interaction, and you do feel really lonely, and it's really, really important to reach out and get a community. And, what's that other saying? 2 heads are better than one, right? So if you're the only BCBA in your school district, who do you bounce ideas off of? And saying, okay, well, great, I've got other teachers in my classroom and we can chat as a community that way. But what about other BCBAs in the field? So,
yeah. And I think realizing that passing the exam is not the end of your journey. It's really just the beginning. And it's a very different journey once you're in the field practicing. You have to just be open to that ongoing learning and just becoming better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's with any field, but for sure you have to be willing to continue to move forward. And I did, one thing I've really been excited about is seeing a lot more of training on trauma-informed ABA and compassionate ABA, because I think there was a time that we got a kind of a bad rap for some things in the past, obviously, a long time ago. But I'm glad to see that, because it kind of, to me, is more in line with the way I look at being a BCBA. And providing ABA services is being responsive to the kid. We are really there for the child. And so anyway, it's important my point to that was it's important to continue to learn and to grow as a BC, not to get stuck in your ways and get stuck in this rut of this is
how we do it because it's how we've done it before. Exactly.
Well, Hanley talks about my way, right? And now it's really important for, to train, tolerance and delay and flexibility and everything else. And we teach that to our students, but, we need to look to ourselves as well and say, am I flexible? Can I change? Right? I've been doing this for ages, but keep up with the research, like get with the times. It's the 21st century, and ABA isn't what it used to be. And, we really do need to make sure that we're connecting not only with our students, but also with their families and with the other professionals on the team as well.
And speaking of families, I'm wondering how, because the kids are coming to you and they're in your classroom, how do you account for any kind of generalization with the families or follow through? Are they involved in what you're doing at school?
I've been really fortunate to have very supportive parents and families that they don't mind reaching out, asking questions, and hey, I've noticed this when they come home. Do you have any suggestions? Or they were signing more, what's going on? I'm obviously I do let my parents know when we teach them something new, but it's what can we do at home to encourage this? So a lot of the parents are very open to suggestions and ideas. And we talk a lot. I see my parents just about every single day when they either pick up or drop off. So I'm sharing this is what we did in class. This is how we're introducing it. If you would like copies of the pictures we're using, I can send them home with you. I can show you how to do it. I've offered to meet with them on not as a parent-teacher conference, but to show them what we're doing, to kind of teach it to them if they wanted to. So I make myself very available to the parents as much as I can. I use a lot of technology remind apps. We have a Google Classroom with our school district or for our classroom. So I actually can share some of the stuff with the parents through that, and which has been great, because then I get my little text messages on my app. They're like, oh, we were doing this and I noticed they started doing this. What can I do next? So I offer whatever the parents are asking about. I'll offer my help as much as I can. And I make available my extra time to them in between my classes. So if they want to come in and discuss things, or if they want to meet Google or whatever, we can do that. So I try to provide as much support as I can. Even though they're not always in the classroom with us. We find the parents coming in sometimes doesn't always work, because then the students don't want to stay. They want to go with mom and dad. So
they've got a history of going home as soon as mom and dad show up.
Yeah, exactly. So they don't get here too soon. But we definitely, my parents are wonderful, very supportive. And like I said, they ask a lot of questions. And when they see their kids are making progress, it's like, okay, what's next? Where do we go? What do I need to do? How can I help them at home? Because at the end of the day, parents want their kids to do the best that their child can do. And a lot of my parents, I've had some parents with really, really high expectations, and you have some parents who are like, I just want them to say mom. It's simple things, but we work with them And with whatever they are wanting from us, we do the best we can to support that.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, a teacher's job doesn't end at dismissal. That I know for sure. You have to really be willing to put in, the extra time, and it really does make a big difference. So if someone was listening to this and wanted to, they work in a classroom or they're a teacher and they wanted to do something to improve how they teach literacy or how they teach communication, is there any advice you can give them from, having bridged those two worlds into what they can implement in their classroom?
I would say the biggest thing, and this is one thing I tell all teachers, special ed or not, use visuals and pictures as much as possible.
That's my biggest recommendation.
Oh my gosh, like everywhere. I mean, you can have a calming corner for the kids who, when they get upset, they cannot tell you why they're upset when they're screaming and crying and having a complete meltdown. When I'm that angry, I can't tell you why I'm upset. And I'm an adult. So have pictures, make a schedule. It bugs me when I say have a visual schedule and I see teachers have a written schedule for kindergartners who are not reading yet. Pictures can go with words. Pictures can always go with words. Pictures and words is a great literacy skill. I mean, they're connecting the two together. I mean, there's so many ways we can use pictures to build our language and to, help with literacy. Pictures. Please add pictures to everything. I mean, if you have a child that's quiet and doesn't want to talk, give them picture choices when you're asking questions about a book. Let them match the picture to the book that you're reading to keep them engaged. There's so many little things, little strategies we can do to help kids build language and communication and just build out literacy. That's like one of the easiest and simplest ways to me. Pictures.
I could go off on a whole tangent about the use of visuals and how important it is. And I do ABA training specifically about the use of visuals, and how I start is saying, okay, name some visuals that you use in your life. Number one, do you have a calendar? I do. I can't function without mine, right? So why does the kiddo in your classroom not have a schedule? Period. Right? Number two, do you use a grocery list or some type of program checkoff list, a to-do list or something, right? And that's huge. And we need to give our kiddos that as well, and very structured. Like, look, first you're doing this, and then you're doing this. Period. Because that's how we operate our lives.
Right. And even with your older kids, that's one thing I said. So, and I use the same kind of example when I would going to train like middle school and high school teachers. I'm like, so you use a to-do list and your planner to remember what to do. We're adults, right? And we do that. Why do we expect our middle schoolers and high schoolers, hormonal, by the way, okay, whose minds are racing all over the place, to remember everything that they're supposed to do that day and their assignments and what's going on at home, but they're supposed to remember all that by themselves because they can do that. Like, that just developmentally doesn't even make sense, And so you kind of get that moment of like, they're like, oh yeah, I guess I might need to work on that part. I'm like, you can just write it down, or, and they're like, well, they don't want to write it down. I'm like, well, you can write it. You can just hand out a little to-do list every day. Just, here you go.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just simple things we can do to make, in the long run, it makes our life easier as the adults. But anyway, there's so many different ways we can use visuals, regardless of the age, from pictures to writing it down to checklist, whatever. There's just so many things that we can do.
I mean, you mentioned Google Classroom before as well. I mean, we've got so much, like, sure, we can write it down. There's sticky notes and everything else, the good old fashioned way, but there's also technology that exists.
And our kids are tech savvy. I mean, how many times can a teacher walk in the classroom in the high school and say, my computer's not working, and a student comes over and fixes it for them? I mean, Right? So, I mean, with the way they use their phones and stuff, there's so many different ways that we can use that to make it functional for them. And again, we're building their independence that way, which is another big thing we try to do.
And I think so many times teachers confuse the use of visuals with a student who may not be like vocal, and they need to use visuals to communicate. And then they get, well, this student is vocal and they can communicate, so they don't need the visuals. And it's just so not the case. Like, there's so much more, behavioral and receptive understanding, and all of that stuff really overlaps with the visuals. I was working with a student the other day in a classroom, and he had, I was there for about an hour chunk of his direct learning time. And we sit down, we're having snack, and there was just a schedule for the entire day. So there was one big schedule for the entire day. And then I'm sitting there for the hour, and I was wondering what's going on. I was like, well, we're having snack. Like, then what?
Oh.
And she was talking about maybe going for a walk and maybe, you know, doing some work and reading and this and then. I'm like, where's the schedule? I'm getting nervous. And I felt so bad for the kid who's just going to sit here at the mercy of whatever's going to happen in this hour. So I love the idea of breaking it down as much as you can. Like I always say, there can't be too many visuals. I don't think you can go wrong.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, and I think that's a really good point you brought up is we oftentimes give kids the big schedule for the day, but like those in between times when they're finished with their work and they're just sitting there, they need a time, like, okay, when you finish your work, then you can read a book, like just give them options and choices. So that way they kind of know. A lot of kids get very anxious when they don't know what they're supposed to do.
Yes.
I mean, all ages, and people don't realize that, but I'm like that a lot of what we see is anxious behaviors. You know,
I do.
They don't know what to do. And then they're being told, stop doing that. I'm like, okay, well then what am I supposed to do instead?
That's it. You say a lot of kids, adults too. I do. If I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, if I don't know the expectations, I'm not on the spectrum, but I'm completely nervous, right? Like, what now? What do they expect of me?
Exactly. That's why we have to remind ourselves we have the same tendencies as an adult. And so I try to always, when I'm talking to other adults and teachers, I try to bring up what we do. And I'm like, okay, now we're expecting kids who are not fully developed until 24. I mean, their brain's not fully developed until they're 22, 24 now. And we're expecting a 16-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 4-year-old to just wait it out. It's fine. It doesn't work.
Right.
It does not work.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Just reminded me, I'm like, I need to make a checklist. This is how my brain works. I'm like, okay, I need to make a checklist of like things to remember when you're doing, classroom teaching, or things to remember when you're in an ABA session. I'll create that sure at some point in time.
I have
all my spare time.
Yeah, I have a lot to do. I have a lot of checklists. I have tons and tons of lists. So I use those a lot.
Our own visuals.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thanks so much, Farrah. I guess one last question would be just, you talked about, advice for other people. Is there any advice that anyone's ever given you? Like what would be the best advice that someone's ever given you?
Oh, wow. Here's what I will say. And it goes back to getting board certified as a BCBA. The exam's hard. I'm not going to lie. I was not the one and done person. I had to take it. I was a retaker several times, and you want to quit. You really want to quit because you're like, if I can't pass this. But I remember I was talking to somebody. They said the test does not define the kind of BCBA you're going to be or the kind of teacher you are. But if this is something you want, it's more of that perseverance to get there. And that stuck with me because I'm passionate about this. I love this. And I'm so glad that I achieved it and that I passed that. And it doesn't define, the fact that I had to take it several times to me does not define the kind of BCBA or the teacher that I am.
It probably makes you or defines you even better, right? It makes you stronger, and that perseverance helps you and defines who you are even more than if, you didn't have to, go through those challenges.
Absolutely. I think it helped me more even in the classroom. I mean, you go in there and you're like, if I've got this, I can do this, So, but I had a lot of people supporting and encouraging me not to quit if this is what I really wanted to do. So,
and passing the exam is really important, but it's not anything close to what you experience working in the field. And from our experience of just seeing so many people who come out of the exam, passing that doesn't necessarily make you a good practitioner, unfortunately. Right. And there's so much that it's not a guarantee. Getting that exam doesn't mean, oh, now I'm done and I know what I'm doing. And it doesn't go the other way either. Just because you don't pass doesn't mean you're going to be a fantastic practitioner. Sometimes it's just the test taking skill. And so we're so glad that you had that ambition and passion to really persevere because it's so important.
Yeah. And like you said, it makes you stronger and better at what you do. And I think that's why for me, it's important to continue learning. It taught me to continue to push forward, not to just, okay, either I quit or I'm done. I kept learning and kept improving and getting better. So there you go.
Amazing.
Right. That's great. Thank you so much. This was really, really interesting and enlightening. And we're so excited to be sharing all of these stories with the rest of our community. And the messages were so great. We love learning from other people who do things maybe a little bit differently or have jobs different than what we've experienced. So we're so glad that you've shared that with us.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed being here, and I'm glad you guys had me. It's really exciting because, like I said, I follow you guys. So this is, kind of like celebs for me to meet y'all and to be on this. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. And it's been really great connecting with you too. It's really, really, really nice to see the face and the personality behind a name. So thanks for being here.
This is awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Love it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Y'all have a good one.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining today's conversation. Wherever you get your podcast, please go and subscribe, rate, and review so others can find out about us too.
For more from How to ABA, including free resources and ABA materials, visit our blog at howtoaba.com. And make sure that you're following us on social media for more practical tips and updates.